Magic.
Just like magic, indeed.
Oh, and look at that. Boom, 8 participants. Hello. We are
Hi.
happy to have you here.
And under the excitement headwork, we've had a squirrel in my backyard. So if you hear barking, that's why. It's not just me.
Anybody?
How did you make the dog be quiet?
There's just paused at the moment. The squirrel was standing there twerking.
It's like your dog comes with the pause button? Ooh.
And now they're just tauntingly watching. It's disappeared for the moment. So it's nice to see everybody here. If people want to put in the chat window, first of all, a reminder to check it from all panelists to everyone in the meeting or to all panelists and attendees so that we can all see things. And tell us where you're coming from, because everybody likes to see where they're at.
Check it out. Woohoo!
Albert, Saskatoon, New York,
Pumped.
Sudbury, Phoenix, Vancouver, Florida.
We have 2 people from Prince Albert. How big is Prince Albert? I thought it was quite small. We have 3 people from Saskatchewan right now. All right, this is a win.
Big enough to have at least 3 people.
That's right, it is. It's the best province. Yay, Saskatchewan.
Janet's on the bus in Campbell River.
All you need is a Wi-Fi connection. This cruise goes everywhere.
This is true. And actually, if you're on a bus, like, you get the cruise movement.
Yes. Hey,
No, as long as, you know, you're not the one driving the bus.
I'm always excited. Queen
That
is
would be
here.
bad.
Yeah, don't be driving the bus.
Queens, New York.
I love and miss New York so much.
My heart is breaking for New York right now, seriously. And I'm not going to go there because I'll start crying. So,
yeah, I had a very good chat though with my agent who lives in New York. And one of the things that they are doing is on her apartment block, they have locked off certain times. So like she has from like 10 to 10:15, she can open her hallway door and let her kids just run madly up and down, up and down, up and down. And then she shuffles them in, and then the next kids come out and run up and down, up and down.
yeah.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good. It's smart.
Yes, because 2 small children in a small apartment in New York is a recipe.
Does not work. I have a client who's got a 10-year-old daughter, and she fosters dogs. And so she's got 2 like pit bull mixed sized dogs in her apartment. And so she has to go out, you know, to walk everybody, including the kid in that.
Yep. I take mine out every day. It's always an adventure.
Yeah.
So I'll have to show you. I have a friend, also a very good author, People Kids writer, Sherry Radford. People have read Sherry's books. They're lovely. She's sewing masks. So I donated elastic to the cause and sent her elastic so that she could make a bunch more. And then she
Well, New York and California, we are now all supposed to wear masks when we go outside for any purpose whatsoever. And they should be cloth, homemade. They're like, you know, they're still saying if it's official stuff, donate to the health workers. But for the rest of us, there are like all these instructions on the internet how to fold your scarves up and use 2 hair bands to like hook it, and like how to make them. So I have to, when I'm done with this, I have to go like search my closet for cotton bandanas or something.
The other thing I learned this morning, because one of our members, Tracy, is making these and giving them away, is you can use vacuum cleaner and furnace filters because they are HEPA and they are almost as good.
Not all
so you
that.
can just cut those out.
Filters are HEPA filters. It's got to say it. Some of the cheaper filters for your vacuum cleaner are not. Those of us who have allergies have HEPA filters.
I've been using HEPA filters for some time now. So yes, I have a very stylish mask, so I'm very excited about that.
Friend Tamara is spearheading the mask effort in Kamloops, and they have created nonprofits, and they have this giant community of sewers. I think she said yesterday she has 600 people sewing masks daily, and they're creating community distribution points for all the neighborhoods and all kinds of stuff, which is very cool. I just put an article that CBC did about that, and it's a good link into some information if people are looking for it.
The fabric and sewing community websites are spearheading. Like I know a bunch of the quilting groups are doing them, and Seamwork, which is a website that has like patterns and whatever, is doing videos on how to make them. So yeah, I think a lot of people have been at it for a while. But it is a question of finding everything you need. So I like the make do with the hairband thing, because I think a lot of us have hairbands in the house as opposed to like official elastic that you can sew onto something.
And since we were talking about something that always frustrates me, which is sewing, because I'm terrible at it. I can knit, I can't sew. But let's talk about something else frustrating. Let's talk about queries. Do you like that transition? I think
Yeah, appropriate
really, I could really truly be a talk show host. I'm missing my calling. All
You-
right, so
You're funny.
I am. I'm mildly amusing. All right, so a couple of reminders for people. If you scroll your cursor across the bottom of the screen, you'll see that there is a Q&A window. That is where Nephele will be looking for questions. You're of course welcome to put comments and so forth into the chat window, but because it moves by quickly, she may not catch anything in there. So please put questions into the Q&A section. Also make sure that you hit the button just above the chat where it says all panelists and attendees, so that you're hitting all of us and not just panelists, because otherwise other people don't see it. All right, allow me to introduce you to a fabulous agent and also someone I am very pleased to call a good friend, Nephele Tempest. So Nephele joined the Knight Agency in 2005, where she opened actually the LA office. And as an agent, she loves to help her clients hone their skills and build their careers. So I do like that kind of focus on career building. She started off on the editorial side, I think with Simon & Schuster, if I remember correctly.
Yep.
But apparently authors originally drove her a little bit crazy. So she decided to try out things like sales and finance. And in fact, she was a financial advisor for a while. So you can pick her brains on how to invest after all of this. But now she has returned to agency, and she continues to build her client list and look for fiction with strong, well-developed characters and a story that pulls her in and won't let go. Many of you guys know her because she is a very frequent speaker at the Surrey International Writers Conference, and we are extraordinarily glad to have her. We will put a link. She keeps a blog, which I think I have sent many a person to, which is very helpful. And we're going to have her talk about queries, but I'm going to put in just one last warning here before I pass it over to Nephele. This is not a chance to necessarily have your individual query parsed. So we're looking for questions that can be general and that everyone can learn from. And if you're that person who asks about your specific query, you won't get it answered. So there, that'll teach you. All right, with no further ado, Nephele.
Thank you, Eileen. That was lovely. And thank you to everybody who's tuning in and, you know, just hanging out with us on the cruise today. You know, so pull up your deck chair and get your drink and your little umbrella. And yes, I have coffee. And we will talk about queries, which I know you all hate for the most part. And I got to tell you, there are a lot of days I hate them too, because I get a lot of them. Just to give you kind of some gauge, January, it's the start of the year, everybody has their New Year's resolution. So in January, I got 400 queries. And promptly had to close my inbox for a few weeks because it was crazy and I was getting ready to go and teach a workshop where I was going to then generate more people querying me. So I needed to play catch up a little bit. And then I reopened and the flood started again. So it is very much a constant thing. So if agents seem a little picky sometimes about what we're looking for in a query, part of that is that we see so many that when someone does it completely wrong, like they're rude or they just leave everything important out or they go way off on a tangent, that's frustrating for us because we need to be able to move through them quickly. It's not that we're not paying attention to what we're reading, we are, but we don't want to have to weed through, you know, your life story or like a lot of stuff that isn't necessarily relevant at this time. Because the reality is that if we like the writing enough to get further with you and to read the full and to chat with you and to sign you, we're going to learn all that. You know, we're going to learn all those great stories about how you first decided you wanted to be a writer, what your favorite book is, all that great stuff. That does not belong in that very first query. Okay, so what I'm going to talk to you about is some of the stages leading up to writing the query letter, what you want in your query letter, some general rules of thumb. And I do want to say, on the flip side of not wanting a lot of extra stuff, we're all individuals, and so we get that no one query letter is going to make every single agent delighted and check every box in our wish list of what should be in the query letter. You know, so we all have, it's like the books themselves, we have personal taste. And so, you know, if I get a query letter, it's a great query letter and it's missing one thing I'm normally looking for, or it has something in it that I don't care about, that's not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna rule you out for that, okay? We're not quite that ridiculous about it. Okay, so when do you start querying? I think this is a big thing that a lot of writers get confused about. And I'm talking now about debut authors, you're unpublished, you haven't written, you haven't had an agent before, you're starting from square one. So my first rule of thumb is finish your book. Finish the entire thing. Get to the end and revise it and get it, you know, where you want it. Because the reality is that I don't want to request more material and find out you haven't finished it yet, because that's really frustrating for me. The reality is if you are querying me, I'm going to tell you, yeah, you know, if you need to do whatever, like after a conference, people will say, can I wait 2 weeks before I send it to you? And I'm always like, yeah, sure. That's totally cool, because you've learned stuff at the conference and whatever. But if I'm sitting behind my desk and I'm reading queries and someone queries me and I read that query letter and the sample pages and I ask for more, I expect them to send it to me pretty promptly, you know, a few days. They're on, you know, traveling or whatever, a week, whatever. But before I forget about it. Because the thing is that market just change. And if someone wants to read your work, you want to be able to get it to them, because there's going to be other things in the process that take time. And so you don't want to need 6 months after I request material to finish writing your book and editing it before you send it to me, because I'm going to need to run edits with you anyway, or whoever you end up with. You know, so the market shifts and changes, and if, you know, you add 6 months there and a year of rewrites before it goes out the door, and then you wait for all the editors to read it, they may not be looking for that book anymore. So do try to, you know, get that work done and then start querying. And then the other thing you need to do, obviously, is some research to figure out what agents you want to query. And that's something you can be keeping in mind along the process of finishing writing. But don't let it panic you and make you rush to finish before, you know, the book's ready, because you want the book to be as good as you can make it before you submit it. So you have to balance those. So people are always asking, you know, who should I submit to? Where do I find agents? I think in this day and age of the internet, it's a lot easier to do, but things you should keep in mind is you want reliable sources. So Joe Schmo's website, where he lists some agents and their email addresses, may not be the best source of information. You may want to use that to get names and then Google those names. But your best shot is always, once you have those names, is to go to the agency websites and read their bios, read what they're looking for, make sure they're open to new submissions. And so that will help you formulate what agents are right for you, because you want an agent who's looking for new material, and you want an agent who's looking for the kind of book you're writing, because we don't all represent every genre. You know, I don't do any nonfiction at all. I do only fiction. And so when I get people submitting their memoirs and their books on finance, because they see that I used to work in that industry, so they just make these assumptions. And it's like, I'm not doing that. So, I mean, it's harmless, but it's also, it wastes everybody's time, and you think you've sent to 15 viable people and maybe you've only sent to 10. So do your research ahead of time. A great website for researching agents is Publishers Marketplace, which is just publishersmarketplace.com. And it is really useful because it's a really helpful kind of clearinghouse, because we all use it. Agents and editors and publishing people use this website. That does not mean absolutely everybody does, but there's a lot of us, and we're not always as up to date as we like to do it, but a lot of us have, pages under our names, and we'll have book covers of some of the stuff we've sold and deal listings of some of the stuff we sold. And a lot of the information on Publishers Marketplace is free. There's also a premium level. And what I recommend for that is that if you are interested, they have you can subscribe for just 1 month for, I think it's $24 now, and then cancel after that month. Do that right when you're really getting ready to submit. Don't do it ahead of that. And you can then have access to the deal listings, which is where editors and agents go in and list book sales in real time, more or less. And it'll be something like, New York Times bestselling author so-and-so's next book in her series, to, and then the name of the editor, and by, and then the name of the agent and their agency, and they will all be hot linked, so you can click on the name of the agent and bring up a listing of what they've sold. These are not always complete. Sometimes for whatever reason we have to hold them because it's, a hot topic, and you don't want someone else writing the same book. So there are, it's never going to be all complete, but it's going to give you a lot of information about different agents and what they're selling. You get an idea of what the market's doing, and you also get an idea of what someone's tastes are, because you can go back and see, well, what did they sell last year that's coming out now, or maybe 2 years ago that's coming out now. I can go read a couple of these books and see what this agent's taste is like. So that's really helpful. But that part is behind the firewall. So you do have to do that. But, if you have a couple of friends in your writing group, one of you signs up and you run the searches for everybody, you all split the $24 for the month. There are ways to do it. If you're trying to keep to a really strict budget. And then there are also a couple of books. Obviously with books, you have a time lag in terms of how up to date the information is. I think someone already put some of the links up, but there's the Guide to Literary Agents 2020, which is Robert Lee Brewer, and this is updated pretty regularly. And then Jeff Herman's Guide to Book Publishers, Editors, and Literary Agents. Again, that's also, I think that one is, they update every 2 years. So the current one, I think might be the 2019 edition, just because by the time they ask us all and they collect the information and get it through the publishing hopper, it takes a little time. But those are useful too. I mean, what you're looking for is a starting point. You're looking for names and genres and agencies. Your last stop should be those agency websites, because that's where you're going to get the really up-to-date information about the agents, who's open to submissions, who's looking for what. And then also a lot of the time, like I know I have a link to my blog there, so you can go off and see what I'm blabbing about, more. I mean, that's like, mine is going to be more up to date than the agency's, because I have to tell the agency to update it. Whereas mine, I just log in and do it. But so those are really helpful. And then for those of you who are using Twitter, you should all be using Twitter. If you use the manuscript wish list tag, which is just #MSWL for manuscript wish list. It's like, I have to think about that. That hashtag, if you run that hashtag, you will see all the editors and agents, both groups, who have posted what kind of stories they're looking for. And these can get super specific, or they can be really general. Like, so I can get on there and go, I'm really looking for romantic comedies right now. Or I can get on there and say, you know, I just read Red, White, and Royal Blue, and I love that, and I'm dying for a politically related rom-com, and it can be a same-sex. I thought that really pushed all my buttons, you know, same-sex romance, blah, 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 blah. So, you know, it really varies. And so you can go through there, and you might just luck into an agent who's like hooting and hollering for something that really sounds like your book, and then you've got someone, you got a little step up, and then you can just say, you know, in your query letter, you can say, I saw your manuscript wish list request for X, and that just sounds really a lot like what I'm writing. So you get a little in that way. Okay, so these are all just my kind of general research things. You know, and you make a list, you make notes about what everybody's looking for. A lot of the times you will be able to also see what kind of information they want with the query letter, because we all ask for different things, and I know we drive you crazy, but some of us want, you know, the letter in the first 5 pages, some want the first 10 pages, some want a synopsis, you know, everybody has a different thing. But it gives you an idea ahead of time what you should sort of have ready to go before you start querying. Okay, so query letters. What I'm gonna do here is I'm going to show you, first I'm going to show you a kind of generic outline of the shape of a query letter, because we've had, I did go through the questions that had been posted on the site in the event listing before we even got going. So I do know some of the things that people are looking for. So I'm going to go through the generic kind of shape of a query letter and tell you what the pieces are, and also, you know, what can get rearranged, what you really don't want to lose that, you know, from it, that sort of thing. And then I'm going to show you a specific query letter. Okay, so I'm starting with the generic, and I'm going to, I know I have Q&A piling up, and I will get there. Okay, I'm going to share that. Let's see if that works. Da-da-da. It's working? You can see it? There we go. Okay. So you should see on your screen from salutation at the top down through a note. Is that, someone nod if that's all showing? Excellent. Okay. So this is kind of the shape of a query letter, right? Okay. So, and when I say a query letter, I mean it should look like a letter, right? Because this is what we're looking at, and I realize that if you're going through something like Query Manager or some other form where they're asking you to drop things in, what I'm seeing a lot is people in the query letter package, in that block, they're not actually giving me a letter, they're just dropping in the pitch. And I don't want just a pitch. It doesn't say pitch, it says query letter. So please do, you know, we still want a query letter even if we're doing it in some other fashion. And I will get into various ways that people are asking for queries submissions in a minute. So this is a basic format. Start off, dear agent's name. It should be the actual agent's name. It should say dear Nephele or dear Susie or dear whoever, or dear Mr. So-and-so if you want to be a little more formal. I personally am fine with dear Nephele. I see a lot of to whom it may concern. I see a lot of dear agent, which I gotta say really pisses me off. Way to make me feel generic. You know, my ego is not such that I really need you to be so knowledgeable about me, but I expect you to know my name, and I really want you to know that I'm female. I mean, I don't think that's too much to ask. I get a lot of dear Mr. Tempest also. So do enough research to know the name of the agent and whether they are male, female, or neither, you know, in our modern careful world of getting everybody's salutations correct. And then you want the body of the letter. You're looking for something that on a piece of paper or a Word document in, you know, 12-point times or something pretty typical is about a page total, all right? you can see this. I have a little space at the top. I have a little space at the bottom. But I don't have, I don't have all the information filled in, but you get it. You'll see in the next one how long it looks. Body of the letter. Okay. So first, a very short intro that includes the title, genre, and word count. If you're using comps, comparing it to other books, movies, something like that, you could put that in here. Second, a short synopsis of the story, which is essentially the pitch. This should be the bulk of your letter. This is what we care about. We want to know what the book's about. We want to know what the story is, okay? So about 2 or 3 paragraphs, maybe half a page. It's going to depend on your story. It should not be just 2 sentences. It should not be just a log line. It should not be labeled log line. It should just be a couple of paragraphs, 3 paragraphs, something like that. Think about what you would have. If your book is published, what's going to be on the back of that paperback? What's going to be that sales copy? What's going to be the flap jacket copy in a hardcover that tells you about the book? Your readers as well as writers. So think about that. It's a little salesy. It doesn't have to include everything, but it has some specifics that tell you what this book is about, and it doesn't give away the ending, okay? Because you don't want to do that. It's a sales tool. You're trying to get somebody to want to read it, okay? And then after that, you're going to have some biographical information. This can be short. If you don't have a publication history, don't worry about it. Don't apologize for not having a publication history. If you do, maybe you've written a few short stories that have been picked up somewhere, online or in print. Maybe you've written for a newspaper. Maybe you have a writing related job. Put that in here. If you don't have anything like that, don't stress it. If you have an MFA, you can put that. If you have an interesting hobby, just a little something personal and humanizing, put that. You can put a line about your family, but put something. We want to know you're a human being with something going on there. So just a little something. This is also where you're going to include your social media and website links. You should have a website. Every author should have a website. It does not have to be big. It does not have to be complicated. You don't have to have a blog there. It can literally just be a landing page with your name, the kind of thing you write, and some sort of contact information and your links to social media. All that should be on there. And, don't go putting your email address on there. I don't want you getting spam to Kingdom Come, but you can put in one of the, the forms with the, the CAPTCHA thing. So if somebody somehow gets a hold of your manuscript and wants to drop you a note about it, like if some agent somehow wants to find you, you want there to be an easy way to do it. So have a website, and that should be in there. And if you're on Twitter or Instagram, I'll get into all that a little bit towards the end of this, so you have a better fix on that. But that's where you would include that. And then finally, you want some sort of a brief call to action sentence, okay? So something like, I really look forward to hearing what you think. I would love to share my manuscript with you. Please let me know if I can send you more material or whatever. Something along those lines. And then you sign off. Sincerely, yours truly, all best, whatever, and your name. In a traditional query letter, meaning one that you are sending as an email to an inbox, however that literary agent takes submissions, you should follow your signature with some contact information. It can just be your email. It can be an email and a cell phone number, whichever, but include it. If you're going through a form, you don't have to do it that way because there's going to be a section for contact information in Query Manager or anything of that sort. But if it's a letter that's just like as an email, or I don't know if anybody's still doing paper submissions. I think mostly everybody's moved online, but there may be some people still doing snail mail letters. If they're doing that, by all means, you want to have a regular, business letter format with your address and all that. But that's what you would include. Okay, so one quick thing. Number 1 and number 2. So your short intro that has your title, genre, word count, and comps, if you're using, and then your synopsis, which is your pitch portion. You can flip those if you want. I know some people are very much like story first and then all this other stuff. And some people are very much, you know, title and word count and genre first and then pitch after. So you can just flip those two things if you want. I will tell you, personally, like I like the title genre stuff first, but if it's second, I am going to read it anyway. I'm not going to hold it against anybody. None of us, we all have our favorite kind of thing, but we just want the information in there. So it should be in there, and it's good either way, and you're not going to lose brownie points. Seriously, if you have an agent who's going to be so much of a stickler that they want it their way or the highway, you might not want to deal with that on a regular basis. I'm just, you know, just a thought. But I really think most of us are a little more flexible than that. Okay, so that is the general look. Alrighty, so that's that one. And I'm gonna take a peek at these a second here. Oh, okay, these are all, I'm gonna wait on these questions because a lot of them are more general. So I'll get to them.
Here's one because you mentioned a website. One person asked, if the author doesn't have a website, would it make you decide not to request them?
I mean, no, but I would like to know. Here's the thing about social media and websites. The website, I feel like you really should have at least something up. You can always redo it and make it prettier or whatever, but you can do like a very basic free website. And you know, the thing is you can do it on like WordPress, the free version, and then you can always upgrade it later and buy a URL and all that. But I would like to be able to find you if I want to find you elsewhere. But in terms of websites and social media, I actually talked to a writer recently who had held off on everything very purposefully because she wanted to write under a pen name, and she wanted the input of an agent on deciding on the pen name. So she had nothing. Now, it's not a deal breaker. It isn't. If I love a book, we're going to make it work. The thing to keep in mind is that it takes time to establish some of this stuff and build up an audience. And also, by the time I start sending out to editors, they're going to be looking for it too. And so if they look, you know, it depends on how much time I take with you. So if you have sent me a really great polished book that only needs a little bit of work, it may go out on submission in a month, which means you only have 1 month history on Twitter and a web page and all that. And you probably won't have very many followers. You won't have many connections. Those things aren't absolutely necessary, but it's obvious if it's a really short period of time. So things to keep in mind is you can change your Twitter handle. You can change it in a way that your followers know it's still you, and you keep them. You change it within your account. So there are ways to work around this stuff. So don't hold off entirely if you can help it. Get something going. It doesn't have to be everything. You don't need the full gamut, but I feel like you need 1 or 2 things to get started. Okay, so we are now going to move over to a specific query letter. And I need to preface this by saying this is for one of my clients, but she did not write this. I wrote this. This is, I am not comfortable using the query letters my clients used for me because it's their writing, it's their material. And also a lot of times what happens is the book between the time they query me and the time it gets published has changed a lot. And so they're not accurate. So what this is a query letter based off of my pitch letter for the book. So I wrote the pitch letter, which looked a little different from this because it's angled differently for obvious reasons. And then I changed the formatting so it is what it would be in a query letter format to an agent. So it's in the first person, the bio information is in first person because I'm writing it from her point of view, but she did not write it, okay? So I want to be very clear about this before everybody starts saying, oh, your query letter was so great to her. It's not hers, it's mine, okay? Alrighty, so we are going to share screen again. And share. Alrighty. That one. Alrighty, so as you can see here how long this is. This is pretty much a full page. And so we start at the top, dear agent's name. So here it would be Nephele. And I'm going to read it aloud. You can all kind of see it. I will talk to the ladies later about if there's some way we can include it. I don't know if we can include the doc. Yes, we can include the doc. So I will make this available. I will tweak it so it's very clear that it was written by me, so you don't forget. And then you'll have it for reference. Okay. We Hope for Better Things is a work of upmarket women's fiction, complete at approximately 110,000 words, about a young woman's investigation into family mysteries, leading her from the civil rights movement to the Civil War and back to her own complicated relationships. So that is just a little general pitch that gives me genre, title. The title changed, by the way. This is the published title. The query title was different. Word count, the fact that it's complete, and then just a very basic sentence about the story, which shows that it's historical. It has historical fiction aspects to it. Detroit area journalist Elizabeth Balsam has a blooming career until her cover for an expose blows up in her face, leaving her subject aware of her investigation, her story dead in the water, and her editor looking for a scapegoat. Unemployed, disgraced, and seeking time to regroup, she moves in with her elderly great-aunt Nora, ostensibly to determine if the woman needs a caregiver, yet hoping to continue her investigation and find a way to clear her name. But Nora's old farmhouse holds its own mysteries, from unused fabric stuffing every closet and drawer to the row of dusty cots lining the attic, a padlocked door in the cellar, and gravestones beneath the overgrown herb garden. Even as she works to vindicate herself in the eyes of her colleagues, Elizabeth delves into the house's secrets, uncovering the stories of two women separated by a century of tumultuous history. Her ancestor, Mary Balsam, who turned the farm into a stop on the Underground Railroad while her husband was at war, and whose very personal secret may have died with her, and Great Aunt Nora, whose refusal to talk about her own time in Detroit during the riotous 60s drives Elizabeth to discover what her aunt is hiding and how love and courage endure in the face of persecution, racism, and misunderstanding. When Elizabeth herself gets caught up in a racially motivated incident, she learns firsthand that the past is not always as past as she believes. From rural 1860s Michigan to the explosive streets of civil rights era Detroit and back to a present where race relations are far from settled, readers take an emotional journey through time to confront the seeds of hatred, examine the ties of family, and embrace the many faces of love. A member of both the Capital Cities Writers Association and the Women's Fiction Writers Association, I served as feature editor and regular contributor for the latter's newsletter, Write On. I was a finalist for the WFWA's 2015 Rising Star Award, as well as the Saturday Evening Post's 2014 Great American Fiction Contest. I live in a little brick house in Lansing, Michigan, with my husband and fellow writer Zachary and a karate-obsessed son. You can find me online at website and on Twitter. I would love to share We Hope for Better Things with you. Please let me know if I can send you the complete manuscript. Okay, so this is a pretty complete pitch sandwiched between a little bit of an intro and technical information about the book itself and personal information about the author, okay? Here we just have a couple of things that she has done that are writing related that show she has a writing community. And then she's got some, things that she entered. It tells me she lives in Michigan, which is important because the book is set in Detroit and is Michigan history she's dealing with. So it gives me a personal tie-in for the author. And it tells me what she is on social media. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing at this point because I'm going to make sure you all have access to it later. Alrighty, so as you can see, there's a lot of information packed into this particular query letter. Not every query letter is going to have a pitch that long. This particular story is a 110,000 word manuscript, and it's historical fiction. It has 3 timelines running through it. So there is a thread that's present day, which is the heroine, and that is the main thread. It has a thread for the Civil War era. It has a thread for the 1960s race riots in Detroit. So it's a long book. It's pretty substantial in terms of storyline, and that's reflected in the query. You don't want anything much longer than that. I showed you that because a lot of people are like, can it be 2 pages? Can it be this? I'm writing fantasy, I'm gonna have world building. Longer books tend to have longer queries because you have more aspects that you want to touch on. So I use this as an example because this is probably about as long as it should be. So that's just a frame of reference for you. It can be shorter, but really, I don't anticipate anything, 2 paragraphs on the shorter side, 1 longer paragraph. If you're writing something like middle grade or children's books, which have, maybe a little simpler storyline, fewer characters, that kind of thing, shorter word lengths, you're probably going to have a slightly shorter pitch in the center of your query letter. But really, it gives you an idea of how much detail I'm going into in this. There's a lot missing, but you don't know that when you haven't read the book. All you want is to convey enough of the story to really grab someone, make them curious. So you can see a lot of the things that I was coming down on here were mysteries. All the mysteries she's uncovering. And the fact that the heroine is an investigative reporter, I'm coming down heavily on the fact that she starts off with this one thing she's investigating, and then she finds another thing to investigate, and it snowballs. So there are a lot of things that you're curious about. I want to know, what does the fabric have to do with the locked door in the basement? What's going on with the cots in the attic? Who's buried in the garden? How do the race riots play into this? You don't think about the race riots in Detroit in the 60s. That's not something that is talked about. But when I first got this pitch, we were a couple of years out from the 50-year anniversary of those riots. And so it was really timely. And so that was something I was really playing up in my letters to editors. I was like, this is coming up, this is going to be in the news, there's a new documentary film coming out. And so that was something that I hung my handle on. And also because there has been a lot of conversation about race relations and own voices. And this was a white woman writing about white women who had lived through these fractious racial times, and for whatever reason had been on the sides of the angels in these very big contentious events in history. So we were skirting a lot of different issues with it. And so I was trying to get all of that into a query letter. Now, it's a complicated story. You may have a really complicated book. You may have a less complicated book, but what you're trying to do is you're trying to build interest in that center section. And it's really, I see a lot of query letters where there's a lot about the author. Why you chose to write it, when you chose to write, your writing history, all the writing classes you took, how much you love to read. I can't, half the queries letters I see, people are telling me they're lifelong writers. Tell me about the book, okay? You're querying the book. You're trying to get me to want to read it. And while it's really fascinating if you wrote your first story at 5, not so helpful in terms of the book you're pitching now, okay? A couple of other things about the book, the structure of what you're including, like optional stuff. If you're writing a series, and you're querying the first book in a series or a trilogy or something like that, I want to know that it's a standalone. I want to know it works as a standalone. I don't expect you to be querying multiple books in that query letter. I just want to hear about book one. Ideally, I want to know that it is a standalone story that has the potential to be a series, or it's a standalone book, but you have ideas for, for sequels if that's, wanted, something along those lines. Let me know it's possible, but don't pitch all of them. Don't tell me it's the first of 7 books and you've drafted the first 4 and the last 3 are outlined, because I'm going to cry if you tell me that. Because the reality is if you can't sell book 1, what are you doing with books 2 and 3 and 4 and 5? Don't jump the gun. It's great to have those ideas. It's great to jot down outlines while you can, so you don't lose those ideas. But keep in mind, if you're looking to be querying for traditional publishing situations, what you really want to do is write that book, maybe outline book 2, and then go write something else. Because if book 1 doesn't sell, you want something else. Because the reality is I sign the client, I sign you as a writer. I want to love the book, but I'm also looking for people I can work with on a long-term basis. I want to, love your other books too. And so if I sign you for a book and we take it out and for whatever reason, things don't work out, we do not sell that book, I can't sell book 2. But if you've written something else you've been working on as another book, then we have something else to go out with pretty quickly. You don't want to have to get to that stage and have to start writing then. So keep that in mind as you're coming up with these ideas. The other thing that I'm seeing a lot in query letters is people who are self-published and are not happy with the results of that experiment and are now querying traditionally with the same project. This is a problem. We are not in a place in history anymore where I can take your self-published book that only sold a few books on Amazon that you can take down, because I hear all these stories. You can take it down, no one saw it. They did see it. It was out there and they didn't buy it. And that could mean nothing about the actual book. It could just mean that you don't know how to navigate, the sales process and the marketing process. And that's a problem a lot of people have. But once that's happened, I can't sell that to a traditional publisher anymore because that book now has a publishing history that is searchable. So if you are on the fence between traditional publishing and self-publishing, really think about what you want to do. I'm all for people who want to go it their own if they think they can handle that, but you have to commit to one or the other and give it a real shot. That doesn't mean 6 weeks. That means a year to see if you can build up momentum. And then if you decide self-publishing isn't working, you can do a traditional publishing shift, but you need something new to query. You need a new book, not book 2. You need a new book, okay? So that's something for that. I'm going to circle back to comp titles now, because you will notice there were no comp titles in the example I used. Now, this particular author, when she actually pitched me, sent me an entire outlined proposal with a whole list of comp titles and a marketing plan. She also happens to work at a small publisher, so she was very on the nose with a lot of that. I don't need that. I'm not looking for that. Comp titles are a tricky thing, and I'm going to tell you this now because this is my particular take on them. They're agents who love comp titles. So my recommendation is you should have some in mind. They should be recent, and by recent, I mean nothing older than 5 years, preferably 3 years or more recent. They should not be the latest enormous best-selling book. Don't. And I'm using examples that are older, and which is against what I just said, but to give you an idea, don't tell me you are writing the next Harry Potter. Do not tell me you're writing the next Night Circus. Do not tell me you're writing the next Stephen King, whatever. That's very high ground to hit. And so when you tell me that, like, it may work in terms of plot points, but I'm hearing famous. And that's what's going to get stuck in my head. So don't use that. If you do not use comp titles, a lot of agents aren't going to mind, all right? The key to not using comp titles is you want a good pitch. You want your pitch to be specific. A lot of the times I see pitches that are way too general. It's about a girl and a guy and they blah, blah, la, 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 la. And there's like, there are no names and there's no specific event listed and there's no detail. And so when I step back from that query and I think about it, that pitch could have applied to any contemporary romance novel on my bookshelf, or, you know, half of the fantasies out in the last 20 years. You have to be specific. You want to tell me who your characters are. You want to tell me, you know, not all of them, but your protagonist, maybe who the bad guy is if you've got a bad guy, you know, who your hero and heroine are if there's a romance. If there's some, you know, X who's getting in the way, you can name them, but you want specifics, okay? If you are specific, if you are giving me a good hook into your story, you don't have to tell me it's like something else meets something else, because reality is that maybe it isn't like something else meets something else. Or I may not have read either one of those things or seen those movies, or I may have and I didn't like them. And this is the big problem. I am more likely to have, these are my two reactions to comp titles. I will gloss over them and not care because it doesn't mean anything to me. Or there will be one or two books or movies that I hated with a fiery passion and I will hold that against you. Not on purpose. I'm watching Eileen's face, but I'm loving it. But it's true. If you come to me and tell me it's Twilight meets the Da Vinci Code, you're going to lose me. You're just going to lose me. I have so many problems with both of those books. And the very fact that you've chosen those are going to make me question what the hell in the book I'm going to like. So they can backfire for you. I feel like that's more of a danger than the upside that you're going to gain by someone being like, oh, I love those two books. I occasionally use comp titles. I tend to do it. It's not a generic letter. I tend to do it with an editor who I know loves something specific, and I know that it's going to work for that editor. Chances are you don't know any of us as agents well enough to cherry pick that way. So keep this in mind. I feel like you hear a lot of agents who are like, I love them, I love them, I love them. I think it's also the kind of thing where if you're doing your research, you may hear a few people like this who are saying either I love them or I hate them. And it could be a sentence in your query letter that you pull out or put back in, depending on who you're querying. I'm not going to tell you you need a very distinctive query letter personalized for every single agent, but there are always one or two things that you can tweak a little to make a little specific. Okay, so that's pretty much my speech. So I'm going to take a look and see what I've missed in the questions.
Well, we have questions. There are questions.
I know they're questions, but I'm checking to see what they are. Okay, how much revision editing do I normally do in a manuscript after I sign a new author? Okay, good question. I personally am a fairly editorial agent. And so that means that I will do what needs to be done with a new client. I'm not going to take on something that's so far off from being ready. Like, I'm not going to sign it at that stage. I'm going to sign it where I see that it's really close and I think I can get you there. That said, sometimes it's 2 rounds, sometimes it's 4 rounds. Sometimes we'll do a few rounds and then we'll take it out for submission and we will have a couple of editors come back with comments that are all the same. And we will pull it, and not pull it, but we will do another round before it goes to any more submissions. So it depends. That said, my job is not to write your book. I like to write, but I like to write my own stuff, not yours. My job is to point things out. So I will come through your manuscript with comments like, you never answer this. This is a huge plot hole. Or I feel like this is really slow here. You're losing the pacing. There's nothing really happening in this stretch of 100 pages. You need to pick this up. I will also do a lot of, I'm kind of a grammar Nazi, so I will do a lot of cleanup in that respect. As I go. I love track changes. It makes my life very easy, that kind of thing. But I do work on that. Not every agent does. I think we'll do a little bit at least, but you will have agents who they don't write, they don't feel like that's their strength. They're more salesy than they are editorial. So that's going to be, it's going to depend on who you're working with. Okay, I should have started at the bottom, shouldn't I? Or no? I'm trying to figure out what is the time frame here? How does this work? Okay. What is the balance between having personalized query letters without being overly familiar? Is it enough to say something like, I saw you on your website, Twitter, etc. And I think my novel will interest you. Yeah, it doesn't have to be super specific unless, here's the thing, if you and I have met at a conference and we had a conversation, remind me, if you read one of my authors, just say, I love so-and-so's books, or whatever. If you've seen the query and it's something specific, that's great. But I get a lot of things where people have gone onto my list of wishes and they've copied and pasted a few things, a few words from each of the things I wanted and glued them together into one really long sentence. And that's what they're telling me they've written. And the problem with that is, first of all, those bullet points are separate books on my wish list. I want a book that does this. I want a book that does this. I don't necessarily want one that does everything, because that would be scary. Sorry, sirens. I live 2 blocks from the fire department. So I get a lot of queries. They're starting to all sound not personal at all, because everybody's pulling direct quotes from my own writing, which is a little weird. So it doesn't have to be super personalized, but make it your own wording, okay? Make it, whatever goes through your head when you read that. You're like, oh, I thought that sounded like mine. That's cool. But some of it feels a little too I was told I had to do this, so this is what I'm doing. It's not, again, getting back to what I really want to know is about your book. If you have a reason for querying me specifically, that's really nice. But mostly if you get my name right, I'm happy. Honest to God, that puts you a step above a lot of people, okay? When is the best time of year to query? It's always hell. I'm sorry. This is the story of you heard me, 400 people queried me in January. I will tell you, it's not that there's a better or a worse time to query. I think the thing to do is you have to be aware that certain times of year you may need a little more patience. So if you query someone December 1st, understand you're in the middle of the holiday season and we travel and we have families and we have things we're catching up on that we need to get done before the end of the fiscal year. And so we may not get back to you as quickly. So if you query someone January 1st, right after the holidays and the New Year's rush, or heading into the holidays, maybe not to follow up promptly at the edge of that window. If they say we answer all queries in 10 days to 2 weeks, don't email them on day 15 and say, where are you? Because the chances are their head's under the Christmas tree or something, be a little sensitive to the reality that, yes, we want to get all through our work as fast as possible, but we're human beings with lives, and occasionally we burn out and want to go drink eggnog and sing Christmas carols or whatever. Go on summer vacation. If I'm tweeting that I'm going to be out of town for 2 weeks, out of the country, that probably isn't the time to follow up, and you may miss it. You don't always see everything, but just keep in mind that some of this stuff is variable because life, right? Okay. Could the publisher's marketplace help with coming up with realistic comps? I think probably not so much. I think for you with your manuscript, I froze. I hope I'm still functioning here. I'm going to keep talking. I'm still coming through? Okay, good. So Publishers Marketplace, I think, unless you are looking for a comp by an something an agent sold that your book is like, which I don't recommend, because chances are if I've already sold one of those, I'm not going to sell another one of those. So you don't want it to be too close to those things. I think you're better off reading a lot to get comps and asking, your reading friends and your writing friends, and going on Goodreads maybe. And if you have one thing that you think it's similar, maybe see if there are lists that people put together and kind of do a little legwork that way. I don't know the Publishers Marketplace is going to be a great place to figure out comps for your project. Okay. This is a good question. And I normally remember to say this, so thank you, Lindsay. Should the query letter have a bit of the character voice or novel tone in the way it's written? So the pitch of the novel, it's great if you can get some of that tone. And by that, I mean, if you're writing a funny book, a nice lighthearted pitch in that tone is great. If you're writing something mysterious, that kind of wording, magical terminology, or like whatever fits the tone of your book or the theme of your book, that's terrific. But that said, please do not write your query letter from the point of view of your main character, because that's a little freaky. You are the author. You know that and I know that, and you wrote the book and you're the one pitching it to me, okay? Don't enlist your character's help for that, okay? Harry Potter didn't write the book. Harry Potter is not going to come out and tell me all about, his adventures. No. J.K. Rowling wrote the book. J.K. Rowling should be pitching the story. So that's where we draw the line in using the voice of the book. That said, also, keep in mind that sometimes it's a little weird if you have written your book in first person. I acknowledge that first person book is in first person, but it's the same thing. It's still you telling me what you wrote about, not anybody jumping off the page. Okay. If you're writing a comedic book, should that be reflected in the query letter? Yes. You can say it either, in that little thing where you're talking about the genre. You can mention that it is an amusing, comedic, light-hearted, dark comedy, like whatever. But it should also be a little bit in the tone of your pitch. If you queried an agent and since then realized you were pitching the wrong genre from YA to women's fiction and have done a major manuscript revision, is it okay to query the same agent again? Okay, so I'm assuming this is if the agent has rejected the book on the initial go. Most of the time, if I'm reading a manuscript off of a pitch, if I'm reading the pages or whatever, and you've got the wrong genre, the chances are pretty good I'm going to figure that out while I'm reading it. And so I might say something to you when I respond. Most of the time I don't want to see things twice. If you have really written it, if it's almost unrecognizable, you can query it again. But you should be upfront about it in the query letter and say, this is very different now and there's been a genre change and whatever. But just be aware that you might just get an automatic no off of it. It's going to depend on the agent. Most of us, because of the sheer numbers, if we have any interest in seeing something again from somebody, we're going to say, if you rework this, I'd be interested in seeing it again. More commonly, what you're going to hear is, this doesn't work for me, but I like your writing. And so I really hope to hear from you again. Now, you're always free to continue pitching an agent. If I reject book 1, you can come back and query me when you've written book 2. I'm not rejecting you. I'm just saying that particular project is either not for me or not ready, whatever. But if I specifically, here's the code of querying, right? If I specifically say to you, I hope to see some more from you in the future, bells should be ringing in your head, okay? You should put me on your, assuming you haven't decided you're done with me, you should put me on your must query next list, because that's me saying, I think you have potential. This just isn't the book that's going to do it, you know? And it could be for a lot of reasons. And I might even tell you why in that query response. It's just really, it all depends on how crazy I am that week and how much I love what I read, you know, how close you were to me asking for it or signing you on it. So, okay, I'm reading a sequel to a novel that was self-published, but I'm writing it as a standalone too. How do I handle this information in a query letter? Okay, this is a little tricky because okay, you can query it as a standalone. You should mention that you previously self-published an earlier story set in this world or whatever. But you have to be aware that some people might feel like the sales record of that book is going to come with you. It may or not be true. It may or may not be a problem. Depends on how well that book did or how badly that book did. But you should mention it. You should just be aware that I think it's going to depend, you know, on who you're dealing with, what their take is going to be. Because a lot of us react in different ways to different stuff. So, and you know, again, also how much we love the book. If the book is fabulous, a fabulous, fabulous book is going to overcome a lot of other problems. That's the reality of the situation. So, yeah. All right, should you query your dream list of agents first or test the query and pages on other agents first? So I always recommend kind of doing a mix because you don't want to send to all of your must have super duper dream agents first and have them all say no. But you also don't want to send to like, you know, a bunch of agents that you couldn't care less about or they're lower on your, you know, list of wants, and then have a bunch of them request and you're put in a time pinch. I mean, you might have time to get another agent from your wish list on board, but if you haven't even queried them, it's really hard because it's common practice to, if you have an agent who has offered and you have some manuscripts outstanding with other agents, you will go to those other agents and give them a time frame. Generally a week or two. More than 2 weeks gets to be really rude, honestly. Because then we know what you're doing and we, you know, that gets to be, you know, we're more likely to just say, no, sorry, you know, good luck with it. Which is fine if you really want to be with the agent who offered, but if they're not super high on your list, you know. So what'll happen is this, if you have 2 weeks, it's really hard to query an agent on your wish list, high up on your wish list, cold. You don't want to query them cold and say, hi, here's my query letter, and also, by the way, I've already got offers of, you know, for representation, so could you hurry up? They're going to be like, it's better to at least have the query with them where they've already got the material. And then what you're doing is you follow up and say, you know, I don't know where I am in your queue, but I just wanted to give you an update that I've had an offer of representation and I need to get back to them by this date. So I would love to hear from you if you have a chance to respond before then. Because then that gives us the time to read, but you're already on our radar, or you're at least in our inbox, you know, and we know you're not doing this cold. So that's why I always say mix it up. You know, like if you have some people in some kind of a rank, I say group them. So you have your like dream, and then the I'd be really happy and the a good place to start, you know, and then maybe do 2 from each in each round or 3 from each in each round, depending, you know, how many you're dealing with. So you have a nice balance and you can kind of work it if you have to. Okay. Question about website. I have a website for my portfolio and blog for my actual work. Should I include an author website separate or it can be in one place? I would do it separate. You can always link to them. If you're doing if you're an artist or a beautician or a whatever, and you think maybe your clients want to read your books, you can put a little link. It's like, I also, and here's where that lives. But I wouldn't tie it all as one big website, because that just gets really complicated. If somebody lands on the wrong landing page, they think they're in the wrong place, because a lot of the times with authors, you're like, oh, did I spell the name wrong? Did I do whatever? And you may lose people. So make it separate. Unless it's, directly related. If you are a writer and artist and you do comics, then that all is kind of the same family. That would work as one big, divided site. But if they're very disparate, I would keep them that way. Will any publisher put resources into publicizing a relatively new author's book? One book published by the traditional route. They will. It's going to vary a lot, and it's going to very much depend on your book, how much they love it, how much they paid for it. It is the rule of thumb that the more they've shelled out, the more likely they are to try to put actually even more money out into the world so they can earn back what they're paying you in their advance. But that said, there is a lot of expectation on you as the author to do a lot of the work yourself. And I always recommend to all of my clients, as soon as possible, we find out who in publicity and marketing has been put in charge of your book. And it's very simple to start an email conversation with your publishing people and say, look, I'm really excited to do whatever I can. I have ideas, but I don't want to step on toes. I don't want to do anything that causes problems for the publisher. Because a lot of times authors will go out and try to set things up on their own, thinking they're being helpful, not understanding that they're basically making problems for their publisher. For instance, if you go to your local indie bookstore and try to set up a reading and signing on your own, then there becomes a question of book placement and book orders, and that's your publisher's decision. And some of that stuff needs to get paid for. And so you don't want to set up something that's, the bill goes to your publisher and they didn't know it was coming, or you set up something where it doesn't fly. You don't have a lot of people come in, it costs your bookstore money, and then they're angry at everybody. So you really want to work hand in hand with them. They'll ask you for things like, who are you connected to? Is there anybody you can get to give you quotes? Do you know any writers in the community? Do you have people who teach, who would talk up your book? That kind of thing. And you work together to come up with all these lists. People, if they're sending out ARCs, if they're doing any of this sort of thing. The chances are, for most new writers, unless you have sold a book for 6 figures and there's been like a big splashy notice in all the press, the chances are you're not going to get a book tour, you're not going to get any of these really big fancy things, because nobody knows who you are yet. There's nothing more demoralizing than being a new author in a bookstore sitting next to a stack of books, and there are 2 people in front of you in all these chairs and you're related to them. People, don't go to these things unless they know who you are, or unless there's something about the book that's been touted a lot. Okay, so a lot of time it's going to depend. But they, they'll put in effort. Maybe you'll do a virtual book tour where they set you up with a bunch of different bloggers who have advanced copies of the books, and they're doing some reviews, and you go and you do a little interview, or you do a guest blog, or you do whatever. A lot of it depends on genre. If you were writing children's books, then it's a different market. You want to get in front of librarians. You want to get, those people, you want to get moms on board. So a lot of the things you're going to be doing yourself. But you'll be in contact with the pros, Okay, I've been given advice using workshop conferences attended recently in place of publication history for writers with no pub history. Good idea, bad idea? I mean, you don't really need to. if you attended something, obviously, and met an agent there, then you should, mention that. Or even if you didn't meet them, like if you heard them speak somewhere, and so that put them on your radar, that's something nice to mention. But I don't think we're going to be looking as much for that in terms of, like, does that make you a better writer? Because they're conferences. We know some of them are great, some of them are not so great, and you can only get so much out of some of them. So it doesn't necessarily have a direct result on your writing. Do I still not represent the mystery genre? I still do not represent the mystery genre. I do. The caveat with that is that I do like kids mysteries, so I would look at YA or children, because they're not subdivided the same way. But I don't do adult mysteries. I don't look to take those on. If my clients decide that suddenly they've written a thriller they want me to sell for them, as one did this past year, I will do that. But, in this case, I had already been working with her for 15 years, so it wasn't like, a big hardship. But I'm not looking to take them on. Because, yeah, I need something different to read when I'm on vacation. I read Eileen's books on vacation. When it comes to comp titles, how famous is too famous? Is it okay to use a New York Times bestseller if they aren't a huge name in the genre? Yeah, I think, yeah, you can definitely. It's a difference between someone who shows up on the New York Times bestseller list for a couple of weeks and someone who sits there for 6 months or just lives there permanently with various, Nora Roberts is pretty much always on there with 1 or 2 things. It just, at least that's how it seems. Do most agents read all their queries, or do they have assistants to screen the query first? We used to have someone, some of you may be familiar with Christy Hunter, who is one of our agents. She was our most recent query reader. She screened all of them. We had one generic inbox where all the queries went. You're supposed to say which of us you were, trying to pitch to. But she screened them all and then only forwarded the ones on to us that she thought had legs. We stopped doing that mostly because there's a lot of us and there were a lot of queries, and poor Christy didn't have time to do much else. And she was also, going to have a baby. And so it was like, she had enough things to juggle. And that's when we switched to using the query manager system. So now we all read our own queries. It's going to depend on the agency. And I think you can generally kind of tell when you look at their websites and see how they take submissions, what the deal is going to be. If there's one generic email that all queries go to, the chances are they have someone screening at least partially. But I think more and more people have switched to Query Manager, and the ones who haven't have dedicated email addresses for each agent that you're pitching to. So it's going to depend. Okay, I see a lot of people saying to read every single post on Query Shark, but there are hundreds now. Do you think that's useful advice or a time sink? I feel like you don't have to go back and read every single one. I think she's also probably answered the same questions a bunch of times over the years, so a lot of them are repetitious. Maybe skim, maybe look at what's gone up in the last 6 months or something. All right, do you like to see links to previous book reviews, press coverage, links, etc. in the query? So this is for if you were previously published. Now, I want to talk about this because this is going to depend on what you've been writing. So if you are writing in the same genre, I don't need links necessarily, but you can list the titles. For instance, if you are a fiction writer and you are pitching me fiction and you are published, by all means, tell me the titles of your books. I don't need links. I know how to use Google or Amazon. I will just look them up myself. If you have some really outstanding review that you would like to link to, where someone says really fabulous things about your writing, by all means, include that. But in general, you don't need to do a lot of that. If you are switching up by a load, make sure you specify. So if you are pitching me fiction and you are previously published in nonfiction, that's not going to help me so much with your storytelling. I like to know that your writing skills are up to par for publishing. So, you know, definitely list the titles, but make sure that you mention that you were previously published in nonfiction. You know, do that so that I'm not scratching my head when I pull up these titles. Or, you know, if you've been publishing YA and you're now looking to write adults or vice versa, say that. Because I like to have a knowledge of how much of that is going to be directly applicable and directly carry over. So that, you know, I know, I mean, I keep marketing stuff in my head. You know, I like to know as I go along, like where you are in the hierarchy of know-how and skill set. And it's not going to really be a deciding factor. I don't want to say if you have it or don't have it, it's going to make a difference. It really won't, because it's still really about the book. But I still like to know. So that.
I think one last question in here for you.
Oh, okay. Oh, how many clients do I sign per year? Very few. Honestly, like it used to be like 2. And like last year I signed 1. I don't think I signed anybody in 2018. I go into every year with goals because I'm like, oh, I'm gonna get 3 new people this year. And you know what happens is I just don't find things, or I find things that I offer for them and like I'm one of 12 people offering for them and they just don't land with me. You know, I did offer for somebody in February and they went with somebody else. And it was very, very, very sad for like 3 days. Everybody had to hear about it. I mean, right? Everybody. I mean, this was somebody who I was super excited about, but so was everybody else. I mean, this is the thing. You know, you go through, someone had asked earlier, how I know I'm in love with a project. And I have to be fair because, you know, they say love all your children equally, and you don't love all your children. I love all the writers equally, but you don't love all the books equally. You just can't. It's like you all have favorite books on your bookshelves. You have the ones you read over and over again. And it doesn't mean you don't like the other ones that are on your bookshelves that you loved and enjoyed and kept, but you still have favorites. So this is what it's like going through submissions. So I'll read a query, and this is what I ask. I request on my query, the query letter and the first 10 pages. And after that, if I want to read more, I will ask for either another 100, like the first 100 pages, or I'll ask for the complete manuscript. The manuscript thing is less likely. And a lot of the time what will happen is I'll ask for the full, if it's a short book, like if it's a middle grade, then 100 pages is almost the whole book anyway sometimes, so I'll ask for the whole thing. Occasionally, I will get something where I read the first 10 pages and then I get the first 100 and I'm reading the first 100 and I'm in the middle of it and I'm quickly requesting the manuscript before I'm done because I know I'm going to hit page 100 and be so pissed off I don't have page 101. This is the ideal scenario. You want the book that keeps you up all night. You want the manuscript that you are like, you really wish you could tell everybody about it right now, and you know you can't because that's not ethical and there are all sorts of problems with that, but you really want to do that. Often what happens is I call my mother, who is 83 and is not going to tell anybody about it, and I evangelize about the manuscript to my mom, who just grunts a lot and has no idea what I'm talking about, but that's fine. That happens like on that level, the evangelizing love it level. I want to say that's happened maybe 5 times in my career. I've been at this for 15 years. Okay, so these are not common. And you know, if you were not the first person to read it, if you've read it and someone else has read it and offered and you've missed that, the chances are really good, unless the first agent to read it is not a great agent, and that's obvious. The chances are really good that it's going to be first come, first serve. Because if you as a writer are dealing with this enviable situation of having multiple offers of representation and they're all really great agents and you don't have a deciding factor between them, you're probably going to go with whoever called you first, because it's just kind of human nature, and we get it. We do. It doesn't make us cry any less when we don't get the book, but those are rare. More typically what happens is I read a book, I finish the manuscript, and I'm like, wow, that was really good. Like, oh, I like that. Like, I got all the way to the end. Nothing pulled me out of it. I forgot I was reading a submission. I thought I was just reading like a book. That's the more typical state of affairs. That makes me really happy. And so then what I will generally do is I will maybe go back to the query and look at, look at their social media, go poke a little, look at their website. That's kind of when I do that. I might do it before then if I'm curious about something, but I definitely do it at that point. And then I'll email them and set up a call. Generally, I know going into the call that I want to offer representation, but it is possible to lose me on the call. People have lost me on the call because, I ask a couple of questions and the answers just don't gel for me. The call is to see if I'm going to be able to work with the person in addition to whether I like the writing. The writing is one part of it, but I want someone who I feel like I can converse with easily. I'm very chatty, in case you can't figure that out. So I want to be able to get on the phone and call a client and have a conversation and feel like they're comfortable communicating with me. I don't want someone who's going to be scared to talk to me about stuff. I don't want to, them to bury stuff and then it doesn't come out until it's a real problem. Communication's key, so that's a big thing for me. Someone was asking earlier about Twitter and politics, and the rule of thumb for Twitter really is, you should be aware that anything you put out on the internet in general is forever. So you should probably not say anything on Twitter or any kind of platform of that sort that you're worried is going to come back and bite you in the butt. That said, I am pretty political on Twitter because I am old and I don't care. I am still careful about what I say. We're all human. I try to be as clear as possible. But I think anybody who's followed me on Twitter knows where I land politically. Now, I feel personally that that is important because people who are diametrically opposed to me politically aren't going to want me as an agent. And it's not because I won't sign them. If I love their book and I feel like they can be adults about the situation, I will still sign them. But they might not like me. When you're doing this, you should like your agent. You don't have to want to marry them or like move in with them or live next door and braid hair together, but you should like them because this is a very personal relationship. It's a business relationship, but it's also dealing with creative output. And a lot of the times your agent serves as your shrink, essentially. I do a lot of hand-holding and I learn a lot of things about my clients that I would never breathe to a soul, but then I need to know because I need to intervene in situations because something's going to be late or something can't be delivered or there's a problem. There's an underlying problem that I get all the details about. Maybe the editor doesn't need all the details. I have to interpret, So it's a personal relationship. And so part of the reason I am political out there in the world is because I am political and the world's a dumpster fire. And, if I'll be blunt, if you are a diehard Trump fan, you don't want to be on my list. You just don't, So as a writer, however, you're dealing with readers. So think about what you write. Think about the content and the thrust of your stories. You probably don't want to alienate half your readership. So maybe be a little circumspect. That doesn't mean you can't take any political stands, but you should weigh your words and remember whatever's out there, you're not getting it back. So that's my advice. That said, I feel like in this day and age, Instagram is a really happy place to do social media for books because lots of pretty pictures, fewer contentious sentences.
So I think
So-
that is a good goal for everyone. Just jump
Yeah.
onto Instagram and leave some pictures. You want to write a picture that or a book that makes Nephele want to call her mom, and you want to not be rude. So those
Yeah.
are some good takeaways. So I want to thank Nephele for her time. I want to thank everybody who attended today. Just a reminder that upcoming at 5 p.m. we have no more shitty rough drafts. So you're going to want to do that, and you can connect in the links. Nephele's going to want to see the thank yous. It'll scroll up in the chat window. And we are wishing everyone a wonderful day. I also think there's a sprint coming up at 1 o'clock. Does that sound right? That is right. So if you want to get some words in, you can do that. And thank you to
I
everyone.
just say, can I just interrupt? If I missed any of the questions, I think there were a few that were kind of not really pertinent to this specifically. You can always at me on Twitter, and I'll answer you. Okay, like if it's just generic kind of questiony stuff, I'm on there too much. So it's nice to get actual bookish questions occasionally. Sorry, Eileen.
Fine. All right. Go, everyone. Have some lunch. Charge yourself up. Get some words in this afternoon, and we will see you back here.
Thanks,
care,
guys.
everyone.
Thanks for all the great questions. Happy writing. Good luck, Weary.
And we'll give everyone a second. If you don't know how to leave the room, you'll see at the bottom of the screen, there's a leave meeting. You just have to press that. And we wish everyone, again, a good day. We'll just let the thank yous roll in so Nephele can appreciate how much people
So
care.
sweet.
Yeah, those are always nice to see.
I see CA for Creative Academy, and I keep thinking you're thanking all of California.
We like
Jackie
California.
Paul wants to know, are you open for submissions?
I am. I'm backed up.
It's okay. You're home. You have lots of time. Start reading.
With the queries, I'm only back to like maybe March 30th or 31st with queries, but I have a lot of partials sitting waiting to be read. That's the problem. Those take a lot more time to read. Like I can do the queries quickly, but once I'm looking at 100 pages, you can't squeeze those in too easily. Those need a little more. I have to block out time.
Fair. That makes sense to me.
All right, everybody, I'm going to hit the end meeting button. We will see you all later.